She laughed so hard tears ran down her face, but the laughter stopped cold when the payment terminal beeped, "Approved for $500,000. Before we continue, we'd love to know where you're watching from. Seeing how far our stories travel reminds us that meaningful storytelling knows no borders. Mark Hendricks was 42 years old and worked as a mechanic. He owned a small garage where he fixed cars for people in his neighborhood. His hands were always dirty with grease and oil. He had a daughter named Sarah who was 18 years old and very smart. Sarah's mother, Maria, had died from cancer when Sarah was only 5 years old. Mark had raised Sarah by himself for 13 years. A delivery woman came to Mark's garage one afternoon. She carried a fancy leather folder with gold letters on it. The letters said JRH, which stood for James Robert Hendricks. That was Mark's father's name. Mark's father had died 6 months ago. Mark didn't go to the funeral because he hated his father. His father had left Mark and his mother when Mark was a teenager. His father chose money and business instead of his family. The delivery woman gave Mark the folder and left quickly. Inside the folder was a letter for his father. The letter said his father was sorry for being a bad father. The letter said there was a trust fund with $30 million in it. The money was for Sarah's college education. There was a black card that would let Mark use the money. The card had no limits and no questions asked. Mark read the letter 3 times. He was angry because for 18 years he had worked very hard to give Sarah everything she needed. He worked 60 or 70 hours every week. He never had time for himself. He never dated anyone. He just worked and worked to pay for food and rent and Sarah's school supplies. And now he found out that $30 million had been sitting in an account the whole time. Mark looked at the calendar. Sarah had been accepted to Johns Hopkins University. She would study environmental engineering. The university was 4 hours away in Baltimore. Sarah needed a car to drive back and forth. Mark had been saving money to buy an old used car. He had about $8,000 saved up. He was going to buy a Honda Civic or something similar that was cheap but reliable. Now Mark had a black car that could access $30 million. He decided he would buy Sarah a good car, a safe car, a car that wouldn't break down on the highway. He put the black car in his pocket and decided to go to a car dealership. Mark went to a luxury car dealership called Prestige Motors. The dealership sold expensive cars like Audis and BMWs and Mercedes. The building was very fancy with huge glass windows and shiny white floors. Everything was very clean and expensive looking. Mark walked into the dealership wearing his work clothes. He had on his old work jacket with a torn elbow. His jeans had a bleach stain on them. He had been working all day and didn't go home to change first. He probably smelled like motor oil and cheap coffee. His hands still had grease stains on them, even though he had washed them. When Mark walked in, everyone in the dealership stopped and stared at him. The salespeople looked at him like he didn't belong there. A young man named Marcus started to walk toward Mark to help him, but a woman named Elena stopped him. Elena wore a bright red blazer and expensive clothes. She had perfect makeup and perfect hair. She told Marcus to go organize some brochures instead. Elena walked over to Mark. She asked if he was there to pick up his boss. She said this because she thought Mark was too poor to buy a car there. She thought maybe he was a driver for someone rich. Mark told her he wanted to buy a car. Elena didn't believe him. She suggested he go to a different lot where they sold cheaper used cars. Mark pointed at an Audi A6 that cost $68,000. He said he wanted to buy that car. Elena laughed at him. She said the car was very expensive and asked if he understood how much money that was. Mark said he wanted to pay cash for it today. Elena laughed even harder. She laughed so loud that all the other salespeople heard her. They came over to see what was so funny. Elena told them that Mark thought he could afford a $68,000 car. The other salespeople laughed too. One man said maybe Mark had been saving his tips. A woman made a joke about Mark's clothes looking like he worked at a junkyard. They all laughed at Mark for several minutes. Elena laughed the hardest. Her mouth was wide open and tears came out of her eyes from laughing so much. She said Mark was wasting their time. She said people like him came in all the time to sit in expensive cars and take photos, but they never actually bought anything. Mark stood there quietly and let them laugh. He had dealt with people making fun of him before. He didn't get angry or upset. He just waited for them to finish laughing. Then he asked Elena if she was done. Elena wiped her eyes and said yes, but she was still giggling. She told Mark he needed to leave. She said he should show her proof that he had $73,000 if he really wanted to buy the car. Mark reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the black card. He put it on the counter. The card was completely black with no writing on it. It was smooth and heavy. Elena picked it up and looked at it. She said it was fake. She said there was no bank logo and no numbers and no name on it. She said Mark probably made it at home on his computer. Mark told her to run the card through the payment machine. Elena said no. She said she wasn't going to waste time on a fake card. She said she was going to call security to make Mark leave. Mark said again that she should just run the card. He said if it didn't work, he would leave without arguing. Elena finally agreed. She took the card to the computer and swiped it through the card reader. Nothing happened at first. She swiped it again. Still nothing. Elena held up the card and said it didn't work, just like she knew it wouldn't. But then the computer made a beeping sound. The screen changed. Elena stopped talking and stared at the screen. Her face went pale. The other salesman asked what was wrong. Elena said the computer was asking for the purchase amount. She said the card wasn't asking for verification or a PIN number. It was just asking how much money to charge. She said it was like the card had no limit at all. Mark said that was correct. The card had no limit. Everyone in the dealership became very quiet. No one was laughing anymore. Elena asked Mark who he was. Mark said he was just someone buying a car for his daughter. Then Mark said he had changed his mind. Instead of buying one car, he would buy 5 cars. He would buy the Audi A6 for Sarah. He would buy a BMW 7 Series for himself. He would buy 2 SUVs to use as loaner cars at his garage. And he would buy a sports car that was sitting in the window because Sarah had always wanted to see one up close. Elena said that would cost more than $500,000. Mark told her to charge $500,000 then. Elena said she needed to get her manager. Mark said no. She had authorization on her computer screen already. She should just process the payment. The other salesman looked at the computer screen and told Elena to do it. Elena's hands were shaking. She typed in the amount. Her finger was over the button to approve the payment. Mark stopped her. He said he didn't want Elena to get the commission from the sale. He wanted Marcus, the young intern, to get the commission instead. Marcus was the only person who had tried to help Mark when he first walked in. Mark said Marcus should get the commission for all 5 cars. Elena's face turned red, but she agreed. She changed something on the computer. Then she pressed a button. The computer beeped. Then it beeped again louder. Then the screen turned green and showed a message that said transaction approved. Elena made a choking sound. The other salesman grabbed the counter because he looked like he might fall down. Marcus came running over from the back of the dealership. Someone had told him what happened. When he saw the computer screen, his mouth fell open. Mark told Marcus congratulations. He said Marcus had just made the biggest sale the dealership had probably ever seen. The commission would be about $40,000. Marcus looked like he might cry. Elena just stood there staring at the computer screen like she couldn't believe what had happened. Mark put the black card back in his pocket. He said he would come back tomorrow to sign all the paperwork. He wasn't in a hurry. As he walked toward the door, the entire dealership was silent. Everyone just watched him leave. Before Mark left, he turned around one more time. He told them that his work jacket was the last Christmas present his wife gave him before she died. He wore it every day because it reminded him of her. He said next time they should think about that before they judge people by their clothes. Mark walked out of the dealership. Behind him, he heard someone crying. He didn't look back to see who it was. If you've made it this far, you're clearly invested. You want to see where this goes. But most viewers enjoy the story and scroll away without subscribing. If this one really means something to you, tap subscribe. It takes a second. If not, chances are you'll forget this channel and miss a lot of great stories ahead. Mark came back to the dealership the next day to sign the paperwork. He wore clean clothes this time, a button-down shirt and jeans without stains. But he still wore his work jacket. He always wore that jacket. Elena was waiting for him at the counter. She looked terrible. She had dark circles under her eyes like she hadn't slept at all. She wasn't wearing her red blazer anymore. She wore a plain black suit instead. She was very polite to Mark now. All the meanness was gone from her voice. She sounded tired and sad. Mark signed many papers. There were papers for all 5 cars, insurance forms, and registration documents. His hand got sore from writing his name so many times. While he was signing, Elena suddenly spoke. Her voice was shaking. She said she needed to ask him something. Elena said the account name for the black card was Hendricks Family Trust. The person who created the trust was named James Robert Hendricks. She said that was her father's name. Mark stopped writing. He felt cold all over his body. He asked her to repeat what she said. Elena said James Robert Hendricks was her father. He had died 6 months ago. She said he was a terrible father who was never home. He always chose work over family. But he had promised Elena that everything he built would be hers someday. The company, the investments, the trust funds, everything. It was supposed to make up for all the years he wasn't there for her. Mark felt like the room was spinning. Elena kept talking. She said her father had another family that she didn't know about until the funeral. A woman at the funeral told Elena that James had a son from before he married Elena's mother. That son had received money from James for school. That son had a trust fund. Mark asked what Elena's mother's name was. Elena said her mother's name was Victoria Hendricks. They got married in 1995. Mark's mother's name was Rose Hendricks. Rose died in 1994. So James married Elena's mother only 6 months after Mark's mother died. Mark had never known his father got married again. He had never known he had a half-sister. Elena started crying. She said the trust fund was supposed to have $30 million in it for her. But when the lawyers read the will, they said the trust was empty. Every penny had been transferred to another trust called the Hendricks Family Trust. Mark's trust. Elena's inheritance was gone. Her compensation for growing up without a father was gone. And Mark was spending it on cars. Mark said he didn't know. He thought the money was for Sarah's education. His father's letter said it was for Sarah. Elena said there were 2 trusts, one for each family. But Mark's trust was set up as the primary account. If Mark's trust ever got activated, it would automatically pull money from Elena's trust as backup funding. Elena didn't know why their father set it up that way. Maybe he loved Mark more. Maybe he felt more guilty about Mark. Maybe he just made a mistake and never fixed it. Elena laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. She said it was funny in a horrible way. She had worked at the car dealership to prove she didn't need her father's money. She wanted to make her own success. And then Mark walked in wearing cheap clothes and bought $500,000 worth of cars with her money. Mark sat down in a chair. His legs felt weak. He said out loud that he had a half-sister. Elena said had in past tense. She said they weren't going to be family. She was done with Mark. Done with their father's memory. Done with all of it. Mark started to say something about the money. Elena interrupted him. She told him to keep it. The money was legally his. The lawyer said the trust documents were ironclad. Once Mark activated the black card, everything transferred automatically. There was nothing Elena could do. No way to fight it legally. The money was Mark's. She said congratulations sarcastically. She said he won. Mark said he didn't want to win. He just wanted to buy his daughter a car. Elena said, well, he got 5 cars instead. She said she hoped he was happy. She hoped every time he drove those cars, he would think about what they cost. She wasn't talking about money. Elena pushed the final papers across the counter. She told Mark to sign them and leave. She said Marcus would bring the cars around. The commission Marcus received was enough for him to quit the dealership and go back to college. At least one person's life got better from this disaster. Mark signed the last papers. His hand was shaking. When he finished, Elena gathered all the documents and put them in a folder. She wouldn't look at Mark's face. She said his cars would be ready in an hour. He could wait outside. Mark said Elena's name. She told him not to say anything. She said to just leave her with some dignity. Mark wanted to apologize. He wanted to explain that he had lost his father too, that he understood what it felt like to be abandoned, that he never meant to take anything from her. But he didn't know what to say. Elena was right. He had taken everything from her. Mark went outside to wait. He sat on a bench in the hot sun. He stared at nothing. His phone buzzed. It was a text message from Sarah asking how the car shopping went. Mark stared at the message for a long time. Then he typed back that he found a car and would tell her about it when he got home. He didn't tell Sarah about Elena. He didn't tell her that her college fund had been stolen from someone else. He didn't tell her that their escape from poverty had destroyed another person's life. Marcus brought the 5 cars around. Marcus was smiling very wide. He thanked Mark many times. He said the commission was incredible. He could pay off his student loans and go back to school. Then Marcus stopped talking. He asked if Mark was okay. He said Mark looked sick. Mark lied and said he was just tired. He took the keys to all 5 cars. The keys felt very heavy in his hands. As Mark drove away in the BMW, he looked in the rear-view mirror. He saw Elena standing in the showroom window, watching him leave. Even from far away, Mark could see she was crying. Mark had walked into that dealership thinking he was the underdog, the poor mechanic getting revenge on cruel rich people. He thought he was winning, but there were no winners. Just 2 children with a father who destroyed them both in different ways, even after he was dead. Mark couldn't sleep that night. He lay in bed and stared at the ceiling. He kept thinking about Elena's face, about his father's letter, about money that wasn't really his. At 3 o'clock in the morning, he got up and went to his home garage. This wasn't his work garage. This was where he kept his personal tools and old projects and the box of papers from his father's lawyer. He took out the leather folder again. He thought maybe he had missed something, some kind of explanation. He found another envelope at the bottom of the folder. He had been too angry to read it the first time. The envelope had Mark's name on it in his father's handwriting. And one word, urgent. Mark opened the envelope. There was another letter inside from his father. This letter said different things than the first letter. The second letter said that if Mark was reading it, he must have found it and wasn't as stubborn as their father had been. The letter said by now Mark had probably met Elena. Their father apologized for never telling Mark about her. He called himself a coward. He said he built a second family to replace the first family he destroyed, and then he destroyed the second family too. He said that's what he did. He ruined things. The letter explained that the trust fund was complicated on purpose. Their father set it up so Mark would have to meet Elena. So Mark would have to see what their father's choices cost other people. Then the letter said something shocking. It said the black card wasn't real. It was theater, smoke and mirrors. The trust fund was empty when their father died. He had spent all the money. His company failed 5 years ago. His investments were worthless. The real estate was mortgaged. He died broke in a house he didn't own, surrounded by things he couldn't afford. The black card was a prop from a magic shop. Their father had a friend program it to work one time, just once, for whatever amount Mark entered. The card didn't connect to any real bank. It connected to a server in the accountant's office. That server was programmed to approve one transaction and then destroy itself. The money that paid for Mark's cars didn't come from Mark's account or Elena's account. It came from the dealership's own accounts. Their father had hacked the dealership's computer system 5 years earlier when he was planning to buy a car he couldn't afford. He discovered the dealership was running illegal businesses, money laundering, offshore accounts, tax fraud, millions of dollars that didn't exist in any official records. Their father documented everything. He gave all the evidence to his lawyer with instructions. If Mark ever used a black card, the lawyer would send the evidence to the FBI. The dealership would be raided. The illegal money would be seized and given to victims of financial fraud. Victims like Mark and Elena and everyone their father had failed. The letter said the cars Mark bought were legal. He bought them with criminal money that the government would have taken anyway. The dealership would be shut down, but only the owners would face criminal charges. The employees didn't know about the illegal business. They would get severance pay from the C's money. The letter said Elena's trust fund was never going to exist. Their father had lied to her like he lied to everyone. But in the paperwork he left with his lawyer, he set up a real trust fund for Elena. $2 million. Not from any bank account. From a life insurance policy he had taken out and paid for over many years. The money would go directly to Elena. She would get it in about 3 months after the FBI case was finished. The rest of the C's money would go to a scholarship fund for kids like Sarah, like Elena when she was young, like Mark before his father abandoned him. The letter said Mark had asked his father once why he destroyed their family. Mark was 16 and angry. Their father didn't have an answer then. He still didn't have an answer, but he said he tried to build something good at the end, something that might balance the scales a little bit. The black card was the trigger. Mark was the weapon. Their father was sorry he made Mark into a weapon, but he was proud that Mark walked into the dealership trying to give Sarah a better life. That's what good fathers do. Their father said he never learned how to be a good father. The letter said he loved Mark. He loved Mark's mother. He loved Elena and her mother too, in his broken way. He was sorry he was too damaged to show it properly. The letter ended with a lawyer's name, Richard Chun. The lawyer had more information and would explain the legal details. Mark read the letter 3 times. Then he called the lawyer, even though it was early in the morning. Richard Chun answered the phone on the second ring, like he was expecting Mark's call. Mark asked if everything in the letter was true. Chun said yes. Chun explained that the FBI raided Prestige Motors that morning at 6 a.m. The owners were arrested. The employees were being interviewed but not charged. The FBI seized about $47 million. After legal fees and paying back victims, about $35 million would go to the scholarship fund Mark's father had created. Mark asked about Elena. Chun said Elena would get notification about her trust fund in 90 days after the criminal case was processed. The money was clean from a legitimate insurance policy. She would also get a letter their father wrote for her. Chun said Elena would understand eventually, even if she was angry now. Mark said Elena hated him. Chun corrected him and said Elena hated their father, not Mark. Mark was just a messenger. Chun said to give Elena time. She would read her letter and understand everything. Mark asked what if she never forgave him. Chun said then Mark would have to live with that. That's what their father wanted Mark to learn. That money always costs something. That choices affect people you'll never meet. That being rich or poor doesn't make you good or bad. It just makes you human. Mark looked at the 5 cars parked in his driveway. They looked different now. Not like prizes, like responsibilities. Mark asked what he should do now. Chun said Mark should take Sarah to college. He should use the loaner cars to help his customers who couldn't afford rentals. He should drive the BMW and remember it came from someone else's crime. He should live in a way that honored that weight. He should be the father his dad never was. Mark said that was a lot of pressure. Chun agreed, but said Mark was a single father who raised a daughter alone while working 70 hours a week. Chun thought Mark could handle pressure. They talked for another hour. Chun explained all the legal details, the timeline, the paperwork Mark would need to sign, the scholarship fund that would have their father's name on it, but be run by an independent board. When the phone call ended, the sun was coming up. Mark went outside and looked at the 5 cars. His neighbors were waking up. Mrs. Chun next door was staring at the cars with her mouth open. Mr. Rodriguez across the street stopped getting his newspaper to look. Sarah came outside in her pajamas. She was yawning. She asked why there were 5 cars in their driveway. Mark put his arm around her. He said it was a long story, but the short version was that her grandfather left the money and Mark bought her a car for college. Sarah asked which one was hers. Mark said the silver Audi. Sarah's eyes got very wide. She said it was too much and she couldn't accept it. Mark said firmly that yes, she could. The car was paid for and it was safe and Mark would sleep better knowing Sarah was driving something reliable. Sarah asked about the other 4 cars. Mark explained that the BMW was his. The 2 SUVs were for his work. The sports car was for Sarah to look at until she graduated college. Then they would sell it and use the money for whatever Sarah wanted, graduate school, travel, a house down payment. It would be her choice. Sarah hugged Mark tightly. She said she loved him. Mark said he loved her too. They stood in the driveway and watched the sunrise. The light made the 5 cars look orange and gold. Mark knew that across town, Elena was probably waking up and finding out her workplace was a crime scene. FBI agents were processing evidence. Somewhere in the future, kids who lost parents would get scholarships with his father's name on them. Everything was messy and complicated. Mark still didn't know if he had done the right thing. But Sarah was going to college in a safe car. Elena would get her $2 million. The scholarship fund would help hundreds of kids. Maybe his father was right. Maybe this was balance. Not perfect, not clean, but real. Mark's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was from Elena. She said the FBI called her. Her lawyer called her. She was reading her letter from James. She said she didn't forgive Mark. She didn't forgive their father. But she understood. That was all she could offer. She told Mark not to contact her again. But she thanked him for giving Marcus the commission. Marcus was the only good thing about that place. Mark texted back that he understood and was sorry for everything. He said he hoped Elena would find peace. Elena didn't reply. Mark didn't expect her to reply. Sarah asked if Mark was okay. She said he looked sad. Mark said he was okay, which was almost true. He said he was thinking about her grandfather, about how complicated people could be, how they could do terrible things and good things at the same time. Sarah asked if her grandfather was a good person. Mark thought about the question. He thought about the abandonment and the lies. He thought about the scholarship fund and the careful planning. He thought about a man so broken that he could only show love through complicated schemes after he was dead. Mark said honestly that he didn't know if his father was good, but his father tried to be good at the end. That was something. Sarah nodded like she understood. Mark said they should get breakfast and then start packing Sarah's things for college. College started in 2 weeks. Sarah asked if she could drive the Audi to breakfast. Mark gave her the keys. He told her to drive slowly and be safe. Sarah got in the silver Audi. Mark got in the passenger seat. As Sarah backed out of the driveway carefully, Mark looked back at his small house with 4 cars still parked outside. It looked wrong, like it was someone else's life. But maybe that was the point. Maybe that was what his father wanted to teach him. You can't control where you come from. You can't control what you inherit. You can't control your parents' sins. You can only control what you do with everything. Sarah drove slowly down the street. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. Her face was serious. In that moment, she looked just like her mother Maria. Maria had loved a complicated man and paid the price for it, but she gave Mark the one perfect thing in his life. Sarah. Sarah said she was scared about college, about being far from home, about not knowing anyone. Mark said that was normal. Sarah asked if Mark was scared when he started new things. Mark thought about walking into the dealership, about facing Elena's mockery, about reading his father's letters and realizing his life was more complicated than he ever imagined. Mark said yes, he was still scared of new things, but he did them anyway. That's what being brave meant. Not that you weren't afraid, just that you did things despite being afraid. Sarah nodded and kept driving. She turned onto Main Street toward their favorite diner. Behind them, the sun rose higher and burned away the last of the night. Somewhere in the city, a complicated story was becoming simpler. Not perfect, never perfect, just human, just real, just enough. So here's the real question. Did you subscribe yet? Thousands of people will listen to this story and won't subscribe. Please don't be that person. If you're listening right now, help me prove something wrong. My dad said I wouldn't even reach 1,000 subscribers, but I believe stories like this deserve to be heard. Help me show him that these tales matter. Please subscribe to this channel, and let's keep breathing life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. And here's what I need to know. Do you want part 2?